The morning air burned with frost and tension. Frosthaven's gates loomed ahead, dark and silent under the first rays of the sun. From the distant hills, a mounted host descended like a tide of black steel. Their banners, stitched with unknown sigils, snapped sharply in the wind, signaling a force disciplined, deadly, and unnerving. The ground trembled beneath the hooves of hundreds of riders, each one masked by fur and shadow, eyes glinting like blades. Rohan Iceborn stood atop the battlements, the black crystal thrumming faintly against his chest. Every pulse reminded him of the cost he had paid to survive the trial by fire. Yet now it offered him focus, a tether to the power he had barely learned to command. He had not yet drawn his sword, not yet called Frost to the battlefield, but already the weight of expectation pressed upon him. Aelin came to his side, her cloak flapping, silver eyes scanning the horizon. "They are no ordinary raiders," she warned. "The banners? I have never seen this insignia. These men are not here to negotiate. They are a storm, and they ride for Iceborn." Rohan nodded, tightening the gauntlet around his hand. "Then let the storm break against stone. If they wish to test Frosthaven, let them find more than they bargained for." Down below, the city militia prepared, but unease hung heavier than their armor. Even seasoned soldiers, hardened by years of frontier raids, exchanged worried glances. Whispers spread quickly. "Iceborn draws frost from nothing. Kaelor's shadow grows stronger. Will he lead or destroy us?" Nthe first rider emerged from the mass, his mount charging forward with a scream that carried over the wind. He raised a black standard, the emblem catching the sunlight, a coiled serpent clutching a snowflake. Every man in the courtyard froze. Even the veteran captains understood the symbol. The Eastern Riders were no mere bandits. They were a mercenary army, rumored to be loyal to the highest bidder, and whispered in every tavern from the northern ridges to the southern river towns. Aelin's hand gripped Rohan's arm. "They've come for you," she said quietly, her tone both warning and plea. "Kaelor may not be here, but he sends his shadows first." Norin's gaze hardened. "Then I will meet them as Iceborn, as the Wolf of Frost. Let every arrow, every spear, and every dark eye witness what it means to challenge me." Nthe Eastern Riders spread into formation, a wall of steel and fur that shimmered with movement. Horns sounded, not in greeting, but in the language of war. Frosthaven's defenders braced themselves. And then the first volley of flaming arrows arced through the sky, trailing smoke and fire, striking the outer walls. The city's defenses answered with rocks and boiling oil, shattering the front line of riders in a brief, thunderous clash. No, Rohan felt the crystal pulse in rhythm with the clash, dark frost lacing through his veins, whispering promises of power and revenge. He did not touch it, he did not summon the frost yet, but already the battlefield bent toward him. Soldiers stared upward, their breaths visible in the cold air. Some felt hope, others, a rising fear that Iceborn's power might erupt beyond command. Nthe Black Standard rose higher, signaling the next wave. Riders surged forward, and the first lines of Frosthaven's militia began to falter under sheer force. Rohan's jaw tightened. Every instinct screamed restraint. He could feel the shadow behind the frost, Kaelor's echo, urging him to unleash the power he had barely contained. He would not. Not yet. He would fight as a man first. A lord first. The Wolf of Frost could wait for the right moment. Aelin stepped beside him, whispering, "Rohan, they will test you in ways fire never could. Decide now, will Iceborn be their savior or their destroyer?" Rohan's eyes narrowed on the enemy line, black spears glinting like obsidian teeth. The pulse in his chest quickened. He raised his sword, and for the first time in weeks, he felt the thrill of command, the surge of danger and power mingling in perfect, terrifying harmony. A horn sounded again, louder this time, calling the riders forward. And then, with a shout that echoed across the snow and stone, Rohan Iceborn leapt from the battlements, black crystal in hand, ready to meet the Eastern Riders. Nthe first clash of man against legend had begun. Rohan hit the snow with a crunch, landing atop the parapet with the grace of a predator and the weight of a legend. Below, the militia braced as Eastern Riders collided with Frosthaven's front lines. Shouts, steel on steel, and the scent of blood and burning timber filled the courtyard. Frost glittered on swords and armor, as if winter itself were leaning in to witness the battle. Rohan's eyes scanned the chaos. The crystal at his side pulsed faintly, thrumming, in response to the violence. Every soldier under his command moved as if tethered to his will, yet unease clawed at them. They had seen him channel frost before, but never like this. Now they sensed that the black crystal's magic was a separate entity, eager, hungry, and only loosely bound by Rohan's will. Aelin rode up beside him, silver hair whipping across her face, eyes sharp as steel. "They will test your patience first," she shouted over the roar. "Let them come. Control the frost. Don't let it control you." Non gritted his teeth, gripping the hilt of his sword. Each step toward the enemy radiated frost, ice crawling silently across the snow beneath his boots. A wave of eastern riders surged forward, and instinctively he raised his blade. The crystal pulsed, but he did not will it to act. His first strike was human, precise, measured, cutting through the chaos with skill honed over years, not magic. Yet the riders did not falter. They were disciplined, more than mere raiders, trained to move as one, strike as one, and die as one. Spears jabbed, arrows flew, and the clash pressed closer, shoving the militia back toward the walls. Frosthaven's defenders began to stumble, exhaustion and fear edging their movements. The black crystal throbbed, whispering, urging him to unleash its power. Aelin's voice cut through his awareness, a tether to his humanity. "Control it, Rohan. You are Iceborn, but not yet a monster." NNHE inhaled sharply, forcing the crystal's pulse into the background. His blade sang through the air, blocking a spear aimed at his shoulder and driving his opponent to the ground. Each clash, each parry reminded him that the battle was not just about power. It was about leadership, about choice. He could become the weapon Kaelor wished, or he could remain the lord his people needed. Suddenly, a rider broke formation, charging directly toward him. The black crystal flared. Frost licked the edges of his sword without command. Rohan staggered, horror flashing through him. The frost leapt forward, freezing the rider's mount mid-stride. The horse screamed, then shattered into a statue of ice, the rider falling atop it, frozen solid. The courtyard froze, not literally, but in collective shock. Rohan's men stepped back, eyes wide, whispers of fear and awe mixing. The eastern riders hesitated for a heartbeat. Then the black standard rose again. They would not flee. They never fled. Aelin grabbed his arm, silver eyes fierce. "This is exactly what he wants. Kaelor feeds on fear. Use the frost, yes, but on your terms, not his." Rohan's jaw clenched. He felt the crystal pulse harder, like a heart beating in time with his own. He could feel Kaelor's presence, probing, pulling at the tether between them. Every second he hesitated, the sorcerer's influence grew, testing the limits of his restraint. Then he saw her, a figure in eastern colors, mounted, eyes glinting beneath a scarred helm. She raised a horn, signaling reinforcements hidden among the hills. Frosthaven's flank was in danger. He realized instantly the battle was a trap, designed not for victory, but to push him to the breaking point. Rohan's pulse quickened. The black crystal pulsed in answer. He would not yield. He would not give Kaelor this satisfaction. Raising his voice above the chaos, he bellowed, "Hold! Do not falter." NTHE soldiers steadied, inspired by the sheer force of will emanating from their lord. And in that moment, Rohan made a decision. He would strike, but on his own terms. He clenched the hilt, channeling only the frost necessary, and hurled a controlled wave at the enemy's flank. Ice bit through armor and flesh, but it did not consume. It was a warning, a demonstration, a declaration. "I am Iceborn, and I fight on my terms." NNTHE Eastern riders faltered, and for the first time, hesitation flickered in their disciplined ranks. NNBUT Rohan knew this was only the beginning. Somewhere in the shadows, Kaelor smiled. And the next test would not be in frost. It would be in fire, and in the heart of Frosthaven itself. The courtyard smelled of smoke, blood, and iron, yet Rohan moved through it like a shadow, blade raised, eyes sharp. The eastern riders had faltered, but only for a heartbeat. From the ridges above, more reinforcements poured down like a tide, shields clattering, spears glinting under the pale winter sun. Each step they took pressed frost into the earth, as if winter itself conspired against him. Rohan felt the black crystal thrum at his side, warm yet insistent. Its pulse was no longer subtle. It hammered against his chest, tugging, whispering, "Let go. Let it feed. Let it decide." He shook his head, resisting. Not yet. He would wield it, not be wielded. Aelin rode beside him, eyes scanning the enemy with a predator's focus. "They've set a trap," she said, voice sharp as steel. The flank, Rohan. The left ridge. See it? Rohan's gaze followed hers. Sure enough, hidden among the trees, a contingent of Eastern riders crouched, ready to encircle Frosthaven's defenders. They had calculated perfectly, designed chaos to draw out the Iceborn's power. He could feel Kaelor's hand in the design, the subtle manipulation that pushed him toward the crystal's hunger. "Hold the line," he shouted to his men. "No step back. We do not falter." NNTHE soldiers hesitated, fear and awe in equal measure, but the authority in his voice, tempered with presence, steeled them. Frosthaven's banner rose proudly, snow clinging to its edges, and the men mirrored his resolve. Yet Rohan knew that sheer will alone would not win this day. NNTHE first wave of reinforcements slammed into the courtyard with a roar. Spears collided with shields, swords clanged, and the battle surged in a chaotic dance of blood and ice. Rohan swung his blade, parrying and striking, each movement deliberate, human. He refused to unleash the frost on instinct. But the black crystal pulsed, impatient, burning in rhythm with his heartbeat. Aelin's voice cut through the storm. "Control it, Rohan. Focus. Do not let Kaelor's hand guide you." NHE gritted his teeth, feeling the pull of the crystal in his chest. With each clash, each life taken, he felt Kaelor watching, savoring, pulling strings across miles of frozen land. He had seen glimpses of it in the visions the crystal offered. Shadows moving in council chambers, whispers in the dead of night, the laughter of the sorcerer echoing in his mind. Kaelor's power was patient, cunning, relentless. And from the ridge the hidden flank attacked. The soldiers of Frosthaven, already strained, faltered under the sudden pressure. Rohan moved like a storm, intercepting, deflecting, dragging each encounter into space where he could command it. He could feel the frost crawling up his arms, reaching for control, testing boundaries. One soldier caught his glance, fear etched on his face. "You wield frost without thought," the man whispered. "What are you becoming?" Rohan's jaw tightened. "What I must." A flash of movement caught his eye. Among the enemy ranks, a rider bore a crimson banner, its edges flickering as though aflame. His eyes met the rider's beneath a scarred helm. In that instant, recognition struck like a blade. This was no ordinary enemy. It was one of Kaelor's agents sent specifically to provoke him. NNTHE black crystal pulsed violently, its voice insistent, almost pleading. "Strike. Freeze them. They are mine to claim." Rohan clenched his teeth. He could feel the sorcerer's eyes on him across the miles, tugging, feeding on every heartbeat. Yet he would not yield. He swung his sword in a wide arc, not releasing the frost, but cutting a path that funneled the enemy, controlling the chaos with his skill, not magic. Aelin leapt from her horse, planting herself between him and the rider. "Not yet, Rohan. You decide, not the crystal." NTHE rider faltered, hesitation in his movement. For a moment, Frosthaven's defenders rallied, pushing the enemy back. But Rohan knew the danger was far from over. Kaelor was patient, and the sorcerer's plan was only beginning. And somewhere in the shadowed distance, the laughter returned, cold, distant, and hungry. "You cannot resist forever, Iceborn." The courtyard had become a frozen hell. Snow churned into slush beneath the boots of men, mingling with blood, and the cries of the wounded echoed like distant thunder. Rohan's breath came in short, sharp bursts. His eyes never left the crimson-bannered rider, who now circled the edge of the battlefield with a predator's patience. Every soldier under Frosthaven's banner moved as if underwater, their motions slowed by fatigue, fear, and the biting cold. NNTHE black crystal at Rohan's side pulsed like a heartbeat of ice, almost sentient. He could feel Kaelor's hand pressing against him through it, subtle but insistent. Every pulse was a whisper. "Freeze them! Crush them! Submit!" But Rohan clenched his teeth, resisting. Each step forward was agony, a war between his will and the crystal's hunger. Aelin stayed at his side, eyes sharp, hand on the hilt of her dagger. "They're testing you," she shouted over the roar of battle. "The rider! It's bait! Don't let him force your hand." Rohan nodded, though the nod itself felt like a betrayal of exhaustion. The rider's horse lunged forward suddenly, scattering a squad of Frosthaven men like leaves in a gale. The rider raised a spear, aiming straight for a young soldier who froze at the sudden threat. "Move!" Rohan bellowed, shoving the soldier aside. The black crystal flared against his chest, the frost crawling up his arms involuntarily. In an instant, the rider's horse froze mid-stride, its legs stiffening like glass. The rider toppled, shrieking, and a thin layer of frost coated his armor. Rohan staggered back, eyes wide. He had not willed the frost, had not intended to strike that rider with anything beyond steel. The crystal pulsed, pleased. Aelin grabbed his arm, forcing him to meet her gaze. "You feel it too, don't you?" "The pull?" He swallowed hard. "It's stronger than before. Kaelor, he's closer. Watching. Feeding it." "Then you must act faster than him," she said. "Control it, or it will control you. You fought monsters your entire life. This is no different. You are the Iceborn, Rohan. Remember that." A distant horn split the air. Reinforcements for the eastern riders surged from a nearby ridge. They were fewer in number than the first wave, but more disciplined. Their commander, a tall man with a wolf pelt draped over his shoulders, signaled his forces, and the survivors began to circle around Frosthaven's flank. Rohan's men wavered. Panic flickered in their eyes. Aelin's hand tightened on his arm, grounding him. He breathed in deeply, feeling the crystal pulse against his chest. It wanted to act, wanted to destroy. He could feel the power coiling in his veins like a serpent. And then he made a choice. Not for the crystal, not for Kaelor. For Frosthaven, He gritted his teeth and swung his sword, directing his men with calculated precision. Each move was human. No magic, no frost, but perfectly timed. Shields locked, spears thrust, men fought with renewed coordination. The wolf-clad commander's forces crashed against the disciplined lines of Frosthaven, faltering at the unexpected resistance. Rohan's heart hammered, sweat freezing on his brow. The crystal throbbed, a pulse of hunger and frustration. You could have killed them all. You could have made them mine. He ignored it, and the battle swayed. The eastern riders broke, splintering into scattered pockets. Some fled into the trees, others fell to steel. The courtyard grew silent once more, save for ragged breaths and the crunch of snow under boots. Aelin's voice was quiet but firm. "You did it, Rohan. You chose." He dropped to one knee, hands trembling. The crystal pulsed faintly, subdued for now, yet he could feel the tether stretching taut. Kaelor's presence lingered, a shadow across miles, his laughter curling around Rohan's mind like smoke. Young soldier he had saved, approached, eyes wide. "Lord, you saved us all." Rohan looked down at him, and for the first time in days, he allowed a grim smile. "We saved each other." But in the distance, the wolf-clad commander had not vanished completely. He raised a hand to the sky, a signal unseen, a promise unbroken. Kaelor's whispers rode the wind across the battlefield. "This is only the beginning." Iceborn. Frost deepened, unseen but felt, curling through Rohan's limbs. The crystal's heartbeat echoed in his ears. And somewhere, in the shadows, a plan older than Frosthaven itself began to move. The frost that clung to the courtyard lingered long after the battle, a silent witness to the destruction Rohan had wrought. Soldiers worked to gather the wounded, some shivering, some silent with terror. The black crystal at Rohan's side throbbed faintly, a heartbeat echoing against his own. He could feel it quivering with suppressed hunger, as if resentful that he had chosen restraint. Aelin followed him closely, her eyes scanning the remnants of the battlefield. "Kaelor will strike again," she murmured, her voice a mixture of warning and dread. "He saw how easily the frost can leap through you. He will not let that opportunity pass." Rohan clenched his fists, the leather of his gauntlets creaking under pressure. "Then we must strike first," he said. The words felt hollow even to him. He wanted action, revenge, closure. But deep inside, he knew the crystal was no ordinary weapon, and Kaelor no ordinary enemy. Every step toward vengeance risked letting the sorcerer's influence tighten its grip. From the edge of the courtyard, a rider emerged, cloaked in green and brown, snow clinging to the folds of his cloak. The messenger's horse had been whipped into a frantic gallop, nostrils steaming in the cold. He approached cautiously, eyes flicking between Rohan and Aelin. "Lord Iceborn." He gasped, dismounting with hands trembling. "Word from the east, another band approaches. Larger, organized, and led by someone calling himself the Silver Wolf." Name cut deeper than any blade. Rohan had sensed this commander's shadow in the earlier battle, but now the threat was concrete, growing, inevitable. The frost in his chest deepened. A warning, a whisper. "They come for you. You cannot resist, Silver Wolf," Aelin repeated, her jaw tight. A title meant to draw fear, But if he commands these men, he's more than a raider. He's a strategist. Rohan rose slowly, eyes narrowing. The courtyard felt suddenly smaller, claustrophobic. Every frozen shard, every shivering soldier, every fluttering banner reminded him of Kaelor's invisible hand. And yet, within him, the fire of human will flared. He would not be a puppet. Not tonight. Summon the captains, he commanded. We move east at first light. We will meet the silver wolf not as prey, but as Frosthaven's shield. As the men dispersed, Rohan lingered by the shattered remnants of the frost-covered rider from earlier. He studied the frozen corpse, its features twisted in terror. The frost had obeyed the crystal, not his mind. He clenched his jaw. This power, this damned gift, was a double-edged sword. Every battle fed Kaelor's influence. Every victory became a tether. Aelin placed a hand on his shoulder. You cannot face him alone, she said quietly, her gaze unwavering. Even Iceborn must rely on others. That is not weakness. It is survival. Rohan's hand closed around hers, a brief but grounding gesture. I know, he admitted, but I cannot ignore the cost. Every life spared, every enemy frozen, it all feeds Kaelor. And soon, I fear, even my closest allies will doubt me. Night fell over Frosthaven, wrapping the keep in a blanket of icy silence. The wind rattled against the towers like dry bones, and the black crystal pulsed softly against Rohan's chest. Kaelor's laughter trickled through the cold, faint but unmistakable, curling around his mind like smoke. Rohan paced the battlements alone, staring eastward. The horizon was dark, a field of shadow and snow, waiting. The silver wolf would strike soon. And Kaelor's hand would move again, shaping the battle even before it began. NNTHE, first crack of ice echoed, a distant, unnatural sound, and Rohan froze. The frost at his feet spread like veins across the stone, a prelude, a warning. He knew the moment of reckoning was coming, the one that would force him to confront not only the enemy outside, but the darkness growing within. Aelin appeared beside him without sound, eyes scanning the frozen skyline. It's coming, she said simply. Rohan nodded, jaw tight. Then we will meet it. Together, NNBUT, deep within the crystal, Kaelor's whisper grew sharper, more impatient. Soon, wolf. Soon, you will bleed for me, and all will think it is your choice. NNTHE wind carried that promise across the courtyard, into the keep, and over the mountains beyond. And in the silence that followed, Rohan realized the next battle would not be against men alone, but against the very soul of Iceborn himself. Dawn arrived over Frosthaven like a pale blade slicing the night. The wind carried with it the scent of snow and steel, a prelude to the battle yet to come. Rohan stood atop the highest battlement, black crystal at his side, eyes scanning the eastern horizon. The first rays of sunlight glinted off the frozen fields, revealing the faint outline of mounted riders. Disciplined, precise, unlike the chaotic raiders he had faced before. They move like wolves, Aelin said softly, her voice cutting through the cold air. Every formation calculated, every step coordinated. This is no ordinary raider band. The Silver Wolf commands them. Rohan's jaw tightened. The title alone was a challenge, a promise of cunning. He could feel the crystal's pulse against his chest, faint but insistent. Every thrum seemed to whisper Kaelor's warning. They will fall, and you will feed me further. NHE descended to the courtyard where the captains had gathered. The men's faces were etched with determination but laced with unease. Frost had hardened their resolve, yet fear lingered beneath the surface. Even seasoned warriors could sense the unseen threat, the subtle chill that clung to Rohan's presence. Listen well, Rohan began, his voice firm, commanding. The enemy is organized. They are not raiders driven by hunger. They are strategists, led by a mind that understands the value of fear and precision. We cannot meet them head-on without risk. We fight smarter, not just harder. Captain Tervain, his face still haunted by the frost-shattered raiders from days past, stepped forward. And the men? They speak of the Iceborn power. Some call it a blessing, others, a curse. Rohan met his gaze, dark and steady. It is neither. It is a weapon, and like any weapon, it can save lives or destroy them. But the choice is mine, and mine alone. We will use it wisely, or not at all. Aelin approached, laying a hand on his arm. And if the Silver Wolf has magic, or spies, or, worse, If Kaelor has already touched him? Rohan's fingers curled around the crystal. The warmth it offered was fleeting, a cruel reminder that every act of power fed the sorcerer. Then we will face it. I have learned restraint, Aelin. And if we must use the power, we will do so with purpose, not recklessness. NBY mid-morning, Frosthaven's walls thrummed with tension. Scouts returned with reports. The Silver Wolf's riders had split into 3 columns, each moving with military precision through the snow-laden valleys. They would converge at the narrow pass by sunset, and the trap was ready. Rohan's mind raced through scenarios, strategies, contingencies. Every decision carried weight, every hesitation a potential disaster. He felt Kaelor's presence like a shadow pressing against his ribs, urging him to act rashly, to spill blood in a way that would bind the sorcerer closer. "Do your men trust you?" Aelin asked quietly as they walked among the soldiers preparing for battle. Rohan paused, watching the men adjust armor, tighten grips on shields, and whisper prayers to gods they barely remembered. "Some do. Some fear me. That fear can be turned into resolve, or it can crumble us. I only hope I am strong enough to guide them without breaking myself in the process." As the sun dipped toward the horizon, the first column of the Silver Wolf's riders appeared over the ridge. Their banners were silver, glinting in the last light, and the riders moved like a single organism, disciplined and silent. Rohan raised his sword, not toward them, but toward his men, signaling courage, unity, and purpose. NNTHE air was heavy with the scent of snow, metal, and unspoken dread. And as the 2 forces prepared to clash, Rohan felt the crystal stir, hungry, impatient, alive. Nellen's hand rested lightly on his shoulder. "Remember who you are," she whispered. "Iceborn, yes, but also Rohan, not Kaelor's pawn." NNTHE frost on the ground creaked, the first whispers of the dark power stirring. Rohan tightened his grip on the hilt, inhaled, and stepped forward. NNTHE Silver Wolf's voice carried across the valley, clear, cold, commanding. "Lord of Frosthaven, meet your reckoning." And in that moment, Rohan understood. This battle would test not only his skill, but his soul. The frost, the crystal, Kaelor's whispers, they were all watching. And the first move would decide who truly commanded the storm. The valley held its breath. Frost crunched underfoot, and every movement seemed magnified, echoing off the walls of snow-draped cliffs. Rohan's men formed a tight phalanx at the pass, shields interlocked, spears bristling like frozen stalactites. The wind tore at their cloaks, carrying the sharp scent of ice and metal, a warning of the violence to come. And from the ridge, the Silver Wolf's riders descended, their horses pounding the snow in perfect cadence. The sunlight glinted off their armor, silver edges cutting through the pale morning like shards of glass. Rohan felt the crystal at his side pulse violently, thrumming in rhythm with his own heartbeat. Kaelor's presence whispered beneath his skin, urging, mocking, calling for a display of destruction. NNTHE first clash came faster than the eye could follow. Horses reared, riders swung spears, and the snow exploded beneath hooves. Rohan's men held, their shields a wall against the onslaught. Yet something was different. The enemies moved with unnatural precision, as if guided not just by skill but by a hidden force. Every feint, every strike, seemed to anticipate their defense, probing for the smallest weakness. Rohan swung his sword, expecting the familiar frost to leap forth, but it hesitated. The crystal vibrated sharply, and he felt Kaelor's cruel laughter ripple through his mind. "Unleash it, let it spill, you know you want to." NHE clenched his teeth. "No. Not here. Not yet." Rohan forced the power down, grounding himself in muscle and bone, in the rhythm of battle rather than the seductive pull of sorcery. He moved like a shadow between the enemy, striking with precision, guarding his men, keeping the crystal from feeding the unseen predator. Nellen fought at his side, her silver eyes scanning, directing, cutting down a rider who would have broken through their line. "Rohan, your left flank! Shield 3, she shouted. And he spun, intercepting a spear aimed at a young soldier barely 16 winters old. The snow was red beneath the fallen, but Rohan's presence, not the crystal, saved them. Yet even as he fought, a gnawing unease grew. Every controlled strike, every deliberate parry, was a battle against the crystal itself. Kaelor's whispers were constant, insistent. "You are weak. You crave the power. Feed me, Iceborn." The frost on the sword's edge quivered, restrained only by his will. Suddenly, a rider broke formation, charging directly at Rohan. The silver wolf's emblem gleamed in the sun, a snarling wolf with eyes like ice. Rohan met the rider's spear with his shield, twisting violently to throw the horse off balance. The enemy fell, but the cry from its lips was not human. It was a spell, a pulse of cold energy that hit Rohan like a hammer. The frost flared involuntarily from his sword, creeping up the rider's armor, freezing them mid-scream. And Rohan froze, horror and rage surging. The power had acted on its own, even as he willed restraint. Men around him stared, fear and awe mirrored in their eyes. The silver wolf's remaining riders hesitated, recalculating. The balance had shifted. Aelin grabbed his arm, shouting over the chaos. "Control it, Rohan! Don't let Kaelor win." Kaelor was already inside, pushing, pulling, turning every instinct against him. "Yes, let them fear you, let them kneel, your strength is mine." And Rohan roared, shaking off the whispers. He turned the crystal to his advantage, not as a weapon of destruction, but as a shield for his men, forcing the frost outward in controlled arcs, diverting blows, freezing only the snow beneath the enemy's hooves. The riders faltered, slipping, unable to maintain cohesion. Silver Wolf's column wavered. Confusion spread among the enemy ranks, and Rohan's men pressed forward with renewed courage. Yet Rohan knew, even as he carved through the chaos, this was only the first wave. Kaelor was learning, testing, binding the Iceborn's power closer to himself with every pulse, every flicker of frost. And somewhere in the storm of battle, the silver wolf watched, silent behind his mask of ice and steel, calculating the moment when Rohan would be forced to choose between control and carnage. Clash roared on. Snow flew, swords clashed, and the crystal pulsed darkly at Rohan's side, feeding on the battle, on his fear, on his defiance. He clenched the hilt, teeth gritted, and understood in that instant, winning this battle would not free him. It would only bind him tighter. And as the silver wolf raised his hand, signaling the next maneuver, Rohan felt it. Kaelor's laughter, cold and triumphant, curling through the battlefield. "The wolf plays my game, and I am the shadow in its teeth." The wind howled through the pass like a living thing, carrying with it the sharp scent of iron, smoke, and frost. The silver wolf's forces had reorganized, their lines tighter, more disciplined, and an eerie precision now marked every movement. Rohan's men, exhausted from the first wave, braced themselves, shields raised, swords glinting in the pale morning sun. Even the seasoned warriors of Frosthaven felt the weight of something unnatural pressing against them. Then Rohan's gaze fell to the crystal at his side. It throbbed with a dark pulse, syncing with the rhythm of the silver wolf's war drums, as if reading the enemy's will and echoing it back. Kaelor's laughter whispered beneath his skin, chilling, irresistible. "Let it spill, Iceborn. Let the frost teach them obedience." Rohan's jaw tightened. Not now, not yet. He gripped the hilt of his sword, forcing his mind to calm, to center on the men around him, rather than the hunger of the crystal. Aelin rode beside him, her eyes like sharpened steel, scanning every ridge, every shadow, every possible angle of attack. Suddenly, from the ridge above, a shadow fell. A dark, swirling mist that smelled of iron and rot snaked down toward the valley. The silver wolf's riders were already advancing. But this was not natural. The frost from the crystal pulsed in response, cold and alive, as though it sensed Kaelor's touch in the wind. Rohan shouted, warning his men to brace themselves, and the first wave of mist slammed into their line. The snow beneath their feet froze solid in seconds, locking shields to the ground, boots to earth. Several soldiers cried out, trapped in place, their swords useless as the ice bit at their limbs. Panic flared. Aelin leaned close, shouting over the roar of the storm. "You can counter it. Use the crystal, Rohan. Focus!" Rohan closed his eyes for a heartbeat, feeling Kaelor's presence press against him, tugging at the frost, urging him toward chaos. But he forced control, pouring his will into the crystal, shaping the frost like a living barrier. The mist struck the barrier and recoiled, writhing as if burned by unseen fire, leaving only frozen snow and shattered ice in its wake. Silver Wolf's riders hesitated, confusion rippling through their ranks. It was the moment Rohan needed. He struck, moving like a shadow among the enemy, his blade precise, cutting, directing, but never letting the crystal spill unchecked. Every swing of his sword was calculated, feeding frost into the environment rather than into flesh, freezing patches of ground beneath the enemy's hooves, throwing them off balance, disrupting their formations. NNBUT Kaelor was patient. He whispered, taunting, bending the frost to tease Rohan, trying to coerce him into abandoning control. One touch, one kill, and the fear will be yours, mine. You will not resist forever. Nay Rider broke from the ranks, riding directly at Rohan, eyes alight with the silver wolf's icy glare. The man raised his sword, and a pulse of unnatural cold leapt from its tip, striking Rohan squarely in the chest. The crystal flared violently, almost acting on its own, ice leaping toward the rider, freezing the air between them. Rohan felt the familiar horror, the fear that Kaelor was using him as conduit. But he held his focus, bending the frost in a controlled arc, sending the ice over the rider's shoulder instead of into his body. The attack was deflected, and the rider was thrown from his horse, tumbling into snow and frost. And around him, Rohan saw the tide shift. The Silver Wolf's forces faltered under coordinated pressure and precision strikes. Frosthaven soldiers, inspired by their lord's control, pressed forward, pushing back the enemy. Yet Rohan knew the victory was fragile. Kaelor's influence was growing, the crystal pulsing with every act of defiance and every drop of blood. From the ridge, the Silver Wolf raised a hand, summoning the next assault. The air shimmered with magic, and Rohan felt it, a storm of frost and shadow descending. He drew a deep breath, gripping the hilt of his sword in the crystal, whispering a promise to himself. I will not break, not to him, not to you. And as the first shards of magical frost rained down from the ridge, Rohan understood that this was no longer merely a battle of steel and strategy. This was a war for his soul, and Kaelor was playing to win. The storm descended from the ridge like a living beast, tearing through the snow with a howl that rattled the very bones of Frosthaven soldiers. Shards of frost, black-tipped and jagged, plummeted from the sky, freezing shields, piercing armor, and snapping timber as though it were paper. Rohan felt the pull of the crystal against his chest, almost as if it were a second heartbeat, faster, stronger, urging him to act, to unleash the power Kaelor demanded. Nolan's voice cut through the roar. Rohan, focus, or we all die. Rohan's eyes swept across the battlefield. Soldiers were slipping, trapped in sudden ice, some screaming as frost claimed their limbs. The Silver Wolf's army surged forward in waves, riding the icy chaos like trained predators. And yet, somewhere within that chaos, Rohan sensed a pattern. Kaelor's weave, precise, deliberate, almost arrogant in its design. NNTHE crystal pulsed again, hot beneath his fingers. One step closer to surrendering to its dark hunger, and he could unleash devastation enough to end the battle in a heartbeat. One sweep, one pulse, one kill, and the storm would bend entirely to his will. But Rohan knew the cost. Every act fed Kaelor. Every drop of blood, every frozen scream, would strengthen the curse, deepen the bond he could not yet sever. The sudden cry split the air. A young soldier had slipped from formation, his legs encased in frost, screaming as the ice crept up his body. Without thinking, Rohan launched himself across the snow, planting a hand on the black crystal, letting its energy surge outward, not in destruction, but in control. Frost leapt from his palms, forming a shield around the boy, melting and reshaping the ice in a controlled wave. The soldier collapsed into snow, shaking but alive. Kaelor's laughter brushed against his mind, cold and bitter. Mercy, Iceborn, you are weak. Let go. Let me taste the storm. Rohan forced himself to grit his teeth. Not yet, he whispered under his breath, voice lost beneath the wind. The frost around him throbbed, alive, eager, responding to Kaelor's insistence. But he would not falter. Not now. NNHE turned to the Silver Wolf, riding high on a black stallion, his armor gleaming with frost magic runes. The figure radiated power, a predator unchallenged in its domain. The wolf raised a hand, and a torrent of black frost shot toward Rohan, twisting in midair, coiling like a serpent. Rohan raised the crystal. It pulsed, alive, and for a moment the world seemed to slow. The black frost collided with the shield of frost he conjured, sparking, hissing, vaporizing in a burst of icy mist. The silver wolf's horse screamed and stumbled. The rider's spell momentarily stalled, but he was not defeated. Rohan Iceborn, the wolf bellowed, voice carried on the wind, sharp as ice. Yield and I will spare your men, or resist, and watch them perish beneath your own hand. Rohan's gaze swept over the frozen battlefield, soldiers trembling, some still trapped, some dying. The crystal pulsed in his hand like a living pulse, whispering, "Obey, obey, obey." The hunger was overwhelming, a temptation stronger than steel or shield. One command, one release of fury, and the storm would obey him, and all the enemy would fall. But the cost would be Kaelor's claim over him forever. Nhe closed his eyes, taking a breath so deep, it filled his lungs with the cold clarity of the mountains. He could hear Aelin's voice in his mind, "Your strength is yours, not his, not theirs." Rohan opened his eyes, steel replacing fear. With deliberate motion, he placed the crystal to the snow and struck it with his sword. The energy surged, not outward, but inward, drawing the crystal's hunger into the frozen earth beneath him, channeling it safely, redirecting its power. The shards of black frost froze mid-air, shivering, then shattered silently, falling like harmless snow. Nthe's silver wolf's eyes widened in shock. Fury twisted his face, and for the first time he realized Rohan Iceborn was not merely a conduit. He was a master. Nbut, Kaelor's voice, though stifled, still hissed through the pulse of the crystal. "You will pay one day, Iceborn. One day, you will beg for me." Rohan ignored it. Around him, the battlefield shifted. Frosthaven's soldiers regained their footing, the enemy faltered, and the storm began to collapse under controlled ice walls. The tide had turned, but the shadow of Kaelor lingered, gnawing at the edges of the crystal, promising that the true war was only beginning. And high on the ridge, the silver wolf disappeared into the snowstorm, leaving only the echo of hooves and a promise of return. Rohan sank to one knee, chest heaving, the frost around him melting, leaving jagged shards that glimmered in the dawn sun. He had won the battle, but the war for his soul had only just begun. The gates of Frosthaven loomed like silent sentinels against the pale dawn, the city half buried in snow, half cloaked in uncertainty. Rohan rode through the streets, his black cloak heavy with frost, the crystal at his side pulsing faintly, a heartbeat both his and Kaelor's. Soldiers and townsfolk alike gave him space, eyes wary, whispers curling behind frozen lips. Some called him savior, others specter. Few could see the man beneath the iceborn mantle. Aelin rode beside him, silver eyes scanning the crowd, every flicker of movement a potential threat. "The council will not be patient this time," she said, voice low but firm. "They saw the frost. They saw what you can do. Some call it miracle. Some call it curse." Rohan tightened his grip on the reins, jaw set. "And they will demand proof. Fire or nothing. I'll not let them make monsters of my men, nor themselves of me." At the council hall, the doors swung open to reveal the lords and ladies gathered in uneasy silence. Banners hung limply, their colors dulled by frost and smoke from the previous battles. The High Elder rose, leaning on his staff, eyes sharp and assessing. "Rohan Iceborn," he said, voice echoing through the chamber, "you return from the field with both victory and dread. The flame of the ancestors awaits your claim." Rohan dismounted, boots crunching in frost. The crystal pulsed in his satchel, eager, whispering, tugging at him. He clenched his jaw, resisting the hunger within. "Then show me the flame," he said, voice steady, yet beneath it, the storm of doubt and hunger churned. Nthe chamber doors opened again, revealing a brazen torch blazing with pale blue fire, its flames dancing unnaturally, cold and yet hot, casting shadows that seemed to crawl along the walls. Rohan stepped forward, every eye upon him. Some watched with hope, some with fear, some with envy. Nhe placed a hand on the crystal, feeling its weight, the pulse, the hunger. Kaelor's laughter brushed the edge of his mind, whispering, "Step forward, let go, yield." Rohan inhaled, feeling the frost curling in his veins, threatening to overtake him. And then he stepped into the fire. Nnthe flames hissed, curling around him like serpents, licking at his armor, dancing over his skin, but they did not burn. Instead, they seemed to see him, weigh him, probe for corruption. Every heartbeat thundered in his chest, Every pulse of the crystal matched the rhythm of the flame. Whispers echoed, not from Kaelor this time, but from the ancients. Voices of kings, warriors, and lords long dead, their judgment impartial, their eyes unblinking. NNFOR a moment. Rohan felt the frost surge, clawing, twisting, demanding release. The crystal trembled at his side, eager to obey the dark call. And then he remembered Aelin's words. Your strength is yours, not his, not theirs. NNHE willed the frost to still, to retreat, to kneel in obedience only to him. The fire flickered, testing him, probing, but he did not yield. Not to hunger, not to fear, not to Kaelor. Minutes passed like hours. Then, silence and NNTHE flames withdrew, bowing around him, smoke curling harmlessly into the air. The High Elder stepped forward, staff tapping against the stone floor. His voice was low, reverent. Rohan Iceborn, the fire accepts you. You are no sorcerer of darkness. You are a man, tempered by battle, by blood, and by will. A murmur ran through the chamber. Shock, relief, awe. Soldiers lowered their heads. Lords exchanged wary glances, and some grudgingly bowed. Rohan felt the weight of the crystal, still pulsing faintly, yet quieter now. He had won the trial, but he knew the true war was only beginning. Kaelor's shadow had not been destroyed, only delayed. Aelin stepped to his side, eyes fierce, lips tight with relief. You passed, Rohan, but do not think him gone. He will come again, and he will come hungrier than before. Rohan nodded, jaw tight, gaze hard. Then we prepare. And next time, I decide the terms. Outside, the first rays of sun broke through the frost-laden clouds, glinting on the banners of Frosthaven, glinting on the black crystal at his side. The Iceborn had been tested. The fire had spoken. But somewhere, beyond the mountains and the frozen rivers, Kaelor whispered, plotting, and the wolf still hunted. NNTHE battle for his soul, and for Frosthaven, was far from over.